Thank you very much, David, and thank you to PRIM and for sponsoring this evening. And thank you to everyone for coming. This is a story I think in 14 years I've told this story a number of times, and some of you may not have heard it. I also want to welcome some old friends that are here tonight that I've worked with over the years on drug safety, and also especially Neil Carlin, who's here tonight. Neil and I have worked together. Neil also lost a daughter to a prescription drug. And we've worked together to get a number of things done, and we're still working together. So I'm really grateful Neil drove quite a distance to be here tonight. This actually is a celebration for me. We are so close to having this bill passed. One thing David didn't mention is I started out, I conceived it as it was my bill. It was going to be a private member's bill, and it's very problematic trying to get private members' bills through 3 readings in both the House of Commons and the Senate. But about a year ago, we had a new Minister of Health, and the time was just perfect, and she said to me, we don't want it to be a private member's bill. We want it to be a government bill. And that was one of the milestones. I just couldn't believe it, because we have a majority, and it meant it was going to go through. And it is going through, and it's just so close right now. It's gone back to the Senate for 3rd reading with no amendments, and I was so pleased, because if the Senate amends a bill, it goes back to the House and goes through the whole process all over. That could take another year. We're into an election. Nothing might happen for a year and a half. And so I was so pleased. So this is, as I say, this is a celebration tonight. So there's Vanessa. There's where it started. That's when she was about 14 and a half. She died on March 19, 2000. She was 15 years old, 2 weeks from being 16 years old. She fell dead in front of me after taking Propulsid. And Propulsid, I found out the next morning, well, she died the next day, I should say. She fell dead in front of me. Her heart stopped from an arrhythmia, which was a known adverse effect from this drug. And she never regained consciousness and died the next day. And I found out that they were well aware of it, and they had figures. They said, 80 people have died from this drug already. And they were well aware of the adverse effect. And when we took her to the hospital, they were trying to restart her heart that night. I saw one of the doctors leaning over, the gastroenterologist actually, who had taken care of Vanessa. And she was leaning over looking in this big, thick blue book. And I wondered what she was doing. Well, she was looking up the drug. And that book is the book that every doctor has and every dentist. It's called the Compendium of Pharmaceuticals and Specialties. That's the book that they almost never look at when they prescribe drugs. But when a patient collapses, they look through to see if they made a mistake. And that's what she was doing. And she looked up at me and she said, "Did I prescribe this drug?" And I said, "No, you didn't prescribe it, but you sent Vanessa for tests. And by the way, we never heard back from your office, and I had to call. And at any rate, 4 doctors knew Vanessa was taking this drug and didn't give us any warning." Now, if it was 1 doctor, you think it's the doctor's fault. When it's 4 doctors, you think, wait a minute, there's more to it than this. And so I began investigating the next day. I called Health Canada, and this nice old guy that answered the phone said, "Yes, we've had Propulsid on the back burner for the last few weeks." I said, "Well, what does that mean?" "I'm just going to pick out a coffin for my daughter." "What does that mean on the back burner?" Anyway, it didn't get any better. It got worse. When I called Janssen Ortho, they played dumb. They knew very well. And it turns out that hundreds of people had died from Propulsid. And then I discovered that this is perfectly normal in the pharmaceutical business. So I made an oath to myself to get some changes made. So Vanessa is, sorry, I'm just getting confused with my staffs here. So I should go right to really what went wrong here, because I've only got 20 minutes tonight. So I don't think Propulsid should have ever been approved, and I'll tell you why. It was on the market from 1989. During clinical trials, they were trying to get the drug to work for babies that spit up or spat up, and 8 babies died during the clinical trial. And they never connected it to the drug. Of course, they probably died of heart arrhythmia, these little infants. So they got it on the market anyway, and then they got it, seniors taking it for GERD, like for heartburn at night, et cetera, and for pseudo-obstruction. They had it approved to help. And they started selling an awful lot of this stuff for people that were overeating before they went to sleep. And the goal is a blockbuster drug. Like, that is the holy grail of the drug industry. When they started to amalgamate in the 90s, they lost their integrity. To have a blockbuster, or a double or a triple blockbuster. Or at one point, Lipitor, the world's largest selling drug, was up at 14 billion a year. Just a huge, huge cash cow. But when they got all that focused on all that money, they started playing down the adverse effects and not telling doctors about them, and they didn't tell the patients, and they exaggerated the efficacy of their drugs, and that was the essence of the drug business. But what I discovered was that the most common adverse effect caused by Propulsid was diarrhea and throwing up, well, combination of the two. But Propulsid was dangerous for anyone who might have an electrolyte disorder. Well, guess what causes electrolyte disorders? Diarrhea and throwing up. And they knew that, and they didn't tell. So 11% of patients who took Propulsid would have diarrhea or throwing up, and it could stop your heart if you had an electrolyte disorder. So that's why I say it should never have been approved in the first place. You can imagine how I felt finding that out. It was on the market for 10 years as they kept advertising it, illegally, by the way, illegal advertising, and pushing the sales up like this while the body count rose. So somebody died in 1991, and they said, oh, it must have been with erythromycin, so we'll change the label. Now, I'll show you what a label looks like later, but 60 pages in point size print, 8-point print, that virtually no one ever reads. We'll change the label. We'll say, don't give it to patients when they're taking erythromycin. Then somebody else died a couple of years later. They said, oh, she took it with clarithromycin. So we'll contraindicate clarithromycin. Now, contraindicate is the most powerful word in drug safety. Please remember it for your families and for yourself. If a drug is contraindicated with another drug, you never, ever mix them because the benefit will never outweigh the risk. And it's the same if a drug's contraindicated with a food or with a condition you might have. And so my hope is tonight everybody goes home as being empowered patients and understanding that you really got to get involved in yourself because the doctors aren't paying close enough attention for the most part. And the pharmacists are kind of busy selling diapers and everything else, and sometimes they're not paying close enough attention. And the drug companies don't want you to have the information because it's not good for sales. So it was on the, Propulsid was on the market for 10 years, and they kept changing the label. And finally, the last label change was 2 weeks before Vanessa died. Of course, her doctor didn't see it. It was March 2000. He was in Florida. Had he seen it, he might have called up and said, we better take Vanessa off that drug. But he was in Florida. He didn't see it. Now, the final warning was the only one anybody paid attention to. And it basically said to doctors, they send a fax to every doctor in Canada, by the way. And it said, don't give anybody Propulsid unless you do an EKG first, unless you do a heart test with all those wires in your head and everything, right? So you can imagine that would get their attention finally, but too late for Vanessa. And by that time, of course, Propulsid was a blockbuster drug, over $1 billion a year. So we have a phone. It's making a musical sound. Okay, for those of you who don't know, which may be most of you, I don't know, it's illegal for drug companies to promote off-label use. Off-label means not approved, never proven safe or effective for. And yet doctors do it all the time. They have a right to do that. A doctor can write a prescription for any drug at any time for any patient for any condition. I call that the Wild West. And they compare notes once in a while. They go to a convention and they go, yeah, I had somebody die and I can't quite figure it out. They call that a signal. Somebody died. There's a signal on that drug, you know? Or they said they had an adverse event, which is like, you know, a bad party. An adverse event means somebody collapsed and almost died, or somebody had their liver damage, or if they're serious. But they exchange notes. But they never really sit down, and the drug companies don't help them collect the information and do what they should be doing. So off-label promotion means promoting a drug for when it's never been proven safe and effective. It's against the law in every civilized country in the world. The drug companies do it all the time. They cheat. They do it verbally when they send the reps into the doctor's offices with a catered lunch or take them to a golf game, whatever. They usually don't put it in writing, but with Propulsid, we even found a brochure which had indications that it was never proved for. We took that to court, and we proved, well, we had to settle with the drug company eventually, but there's no question they do it. They promote off-label, and it's the most dangerous kind of prescribing because it's never proven safe and effective. So I'm not saying it's always bad. I'm saying it's the riskiest, and they're not supposed to do it. But they were doing it a lot for Propulsid. By 2000, there were 100 contraindications for Propulsid. Remember I told you how important a contraindication is? It means you never mix the two. I went a few years ago to the pharmaceutical library. I found there are 500 now. So there are 500 things if you take with Propulsid could risk stopping your heart or causing other serious adverse effects. And they still sell Propulsid in at least 70 countries. I can't get a figure. They won't provide it, but at least 70 countries because nobody told them not to. So what else went wrong? Propulsid was dangerously dose sensitive. There's a term that your doctor uses that you may be familiar or not, and most people aren't. It's called a narrow therapeutic index, right? That's medical language for if you take too much, it could really harm you. It means the difference between what can help you and what can harm you is very little. And there are doctors that if you take Imitrex, which is a drug that works for migraine, but if you take, you're not supposed to take more than, I think, 3 a month or something. Doctors give patients bottles of it. Now, if you've got a really fierce migraine headache, you might take more than one, or you're not supposed to. You might take a couple and throw them back like aspirins. That could stop your heart. But this is what goes on. The doctors get very casual about these things, and the drug companies don't issue proper safety warnings. So Imitrex is dose sensitive, and Propulsid was. In fact, they're now selling at 5 milligrams 2 or 3 times a day instead of 10, and I think they're getting away with that because it appears not so many people are keeling over. So. There was a lack of post-market surveillance. To get their drugs approved, sometimes to get them approved quicker, they go to the FDA or they go to Health Canada and they say, we're going to do a lot of surveillance. After we get it on the market, we're going to watch very carefully and do trials, and we're going to make sure that it's safe for people. And we'll report that back to you and report it to the doctors. So they get their drug approved and they get it on the market, and then they never do anything. In fact, I never found any post-market surveillance for Propulsid, ever. And I told you how Propulsid was contraindicated for its most common side effect, which was diarrhea. Now, inadequate warnings. Well, we had no warning. 4 doctors knew Vanessa was taking this drug. One of them, his wife, was taking it. If he knew there was a risk, he would never let his wife take it. So the doctors weren't getting the messages. Clearly, they weren't getting the messages, and that was shown in the inquest into Vanessa's death. And one of the reasons why is nobody reads drug labels. 60 pages of 8-point print. It's called label clutter. And the labels are written by lawyers. They're written by lawyers, so if somebody dies or gets, has damage to their kidneys or something, they can go to court and say to the judge, look here, page 17, right here, line 4. See? There's the warning about kidney damage. But nobody ever gets to page 17. So it's a useless warning, and it allows them to keep the sales up. In fact, when they were issuing those 5 label changes for Vanessa over 10 years, the way you measure if a label change is being read and is being effective is doctors' prescribing habits. Were the prescriptions going down, or were they at least leveling off? No, they never even slowed. So they knew those label changes were doing absolutely nothing, and they got Propulsid up to a blockbuster status. So just what went wrong? I said it should never be approved. It was never proven to be efficacious, by the way. There's a quote from Janice Bush. She was vice president of Janssen Ortho. And just before they took it off the market in the States, they have a written document from her, an email that she sent to some of her fellow executives at Janssen. And it said, do we really want to face the FDA never having proved efficacy? He admitted they never proved it really even worked. It was working probably by the placebo effect. And it's died. So under Vanessa's law, this is huge. This is very powerful. Drug companies will have to register all clinical trials and make available positive and negative results in a public registry. I'll tell you why that's important. Because what the drug companies do is they make all the researchers sign a paper. It's basically a gag order. It says, you do this trial. We want to know if it's safe and effective. If we tell you to stop it at any given time, you must stop it and never talk about it again. And if you do, we will sue you. Your career will be over. That's the model. That's the model we have today. And they have friendly researchers who try and get good results for them. But if they come up with a trial and they call them after the trial's on for a couple of months, say, how's the drug doing? They go, well, we think it's causing patients harm. Or they say, we think it's not working. They tell them to stop the trial. No one ever sees it again. Then they get another one. They get another researcher. They redesign it. They get another one. So there might be 4 or 5 trials out there that show this brand new drug doesn't work or is harming patients. They're all buried. Researchers never see them. Regulators never see them. Well, then they get a trial that shows that it works slightly better than placebo. That's the trial that gets published. And there wasn't a lot of evident harm in the trial. And so that's the one that gets published repeatedly. It's called publication bias. And so that's how they get all the doctors thinking that it's a good drug. They show them only the trials that show the positive results, and the bad ones are never revealed. Under Vanessa's law, they can't do that. They have to publish it on a registry. They can find it on the internet. Researchers like Dr. Joe Election at York University, he can go and look at a drug and find and look at every trial that ever started on this drug. And you can check the outliers. And the outliers are when patients drop out of a drug trial. And sometimes they don't even know where they're dropping out. They just feel funny. It's because they're having an adverse reaction to the drug sometimes. And so what the drug companies do is they take them out of the trial as if they never existed. Hey, for me, those are the most important people in the drug trial. They dropped out, and there was a reason, and they should not be eliminated from the trial results. Under Vanessa's law, they won't be able to eliminate the outliers. They won't be able to just take them out pretending they never existed. This is very, very powerful, and Dr. Kelvin Ogilvie, who's a senator who chaired the committee, reviewed the bill in the Senate. He's a brilliant man who invented a drug that saved many lives. He said he believes that more researchers will come to Canada once we have Vanessa's law who want integrity in research. We will get good research, we will get effective research, and they'll want to be here. So, also, this is really funny. What is confidential business information? I told you about the outliers, the people they want to pretend never existed. They call that confidential business information. That should never be revealed. It's competitive. It's not competitive. It's life-saving information for patients. So when Vanessa's law went through the House of Commons, they came before a committee. I'm on the Standing Committee Health, and they went on how they support it and stuff. And I was just chuckling through all this stuff, how they support it. They don't support it at all. They just have no choice but to support it. They dare not speak against it. Well, then once it got to the Senate and they thought no one was looking, they appeared, the RX&D folks from the big pharma companies, and they wanted to change it. They want to protect their confidential business information. And so they want to change it so that the minister can only reveal it to other governments or to First Nations or to people she's seeking advice from when it's an imminent risk. So serious risk, no. It has to be imminent. Well, this is them trying to wriggle out. They're more concerned with protecting their confidential business information than they are with patient safety, and I think this was evidence of it. I thought it was so funny. So I saw them there at the Senate. They shook my hand. Hello, Mr. Young. I said, you guys are still at it, eh? So they just walked in. But it's really funny. So the House and Commons, we're in support of it, and they go on the record and they say all the right things, and then over in the Senate, they're quietly trying to get the senators to amend the bill so that they can protect their confidential business information, which was the source of many problems in the first place. So under Vanessa's law, the minister can release it to government's researchers, or if there is a risk of serious risk of injury to the public, she doesn't have to ask the drug companies if she can release it, or even give them notice. She just will, and that's very powerful. So next is 7 ways. These are some of the ways that they've corrupted clinical trials. I call Inca-Dinka do-over. What they do is the one I just told you about. They cut off all the studies that bear bad news as if they never existed. The other one is I lost my report card. I like this one. They bury completed studies that show the drug didn't work or was risky as if they never existed. So they complete the study and they still don't like it, so they bury that one, so the doctors don't see it. Sometimes they have so much money, they're the wealthiest companies in the world, they actually get a company to create a fake medical journal, and it looks like a real one, and they drop them off in the doctor's offices. So the doctor leads through it, and guess what's the first thing he says? This trial, the one positive one that shows how great this drug is. The washout phase I just told you about, where some patients wash out early in the trials, and they don't include them in the final result, so they get a better result. This is a corrupt practice, and it's common. They put their thumb on the scale, so they compare their drug against another drug, and they use a higher dose of their drug, and they go, look, it got better results. It's really comical if you think about it. And then they also do some drug trials in the offices with really expensive drugs. They'll go to a thought leader, a specialist who treats, for example, rheumatoid arthritis, and they say, we want you to do a test of well, there's one example I can think of, Remicade, which is an arthritis drug. They wanted to do a test because it helps patients with Crohn's, but it's an off-label use. So anyway, they get a doctor. They want to get all the patients' names who have Crohn's disease, and so the doctor signs an agreement, and they pay the doctor $10,000 to $20,000 a patient, side action, to do a trial in their office, and the doctor has to tell the patient this is an off-label use of the drug, but the doctor doesn't have to say, thanks for the 10 grand, because if you try this for me, I'm making an extra 10 grand. So if the doctor does 100 patients, he can make $1 million to $2 million on the side. I think the patient should be told. I think a patient should be told that if the doctor is doing a trial and is getting paid a considerable sum of money to do a trial on them. So, Propulsa was never approved for pediatric use. So Vanessa was a child, technically. She was 15 years old, 2 weeks from being 16 years old. But children are more susceptible to adverse reactions. Their organs are more immature, and they might be more likely to suffer adverse reactions. In fact, Vanessa might have been affected with her heart more susceptible to arrhythmia for that reason. So from now on, drug authorizations, when a drug is authorized or it's denied approval, that will be published on a public website. So researchers and doctors can check. Off-label use that is unsafe will attract binding conditions. So if Health Canada finds out doctors are using an off-label use of a drug that is not safe, because they often don't talk a lot, they focus on their own practice, they can order new binding conditions on market authorizations, which is drug companies, such as active surveillance. They can order the drug company, look, we know this drug is being used off-label. We want you to report how it's being used and any adverse drug reactions. Dosing information or toxicity, especially for children. This is going to be very valuable because drugs are not tested on children. And so it's going to be very valuable for people that have to take care of little children and do have to give them drugs to treat serious conditions. They could order new testing. This gives the minister or health care officials to order new testing or studies on a subgroup of patients, like seniors or children, and even mid-market, while they're still in the process of developing the market. Or they can put new terms and conditions on the use. They can just, the minister could just issue an order, this is not a safe use, don't prescribe it for this anymore. Tell doctors not to do it, contraindicate it, in fact. More pediatric use. Europe and United States publish way more information on pediatric use of drugs. The drug companies file it there, but they don't file it in Canada. So pediatricians in Canada, they can't get it. And so the minister has the power under Vanessa's law to just tell them, we want you to publish what they publish in Europe, what they're publishing in the United States. This is all new. It's hard to believe the minister didn't have the power before, isn't it? But it's all new, yeah. And then the minister also has power to direct authorization holders, drug companies, to report any matters regarding any serious risk of injury from outside Canada. So when we were in court in the inquest into Vanessa's death, my lawyer asked the vice president of Janssen Ortho, how many deaths has Propulsid caused worldwide? And you know what she said? I don't know. She didn't know. That was all in Belgium at head office. And she said, I'd have to find out. So the judge said, the coroner said to her, look, it's lunch hour. We want you to call over to Belgium at lunch hour and come back and tell us after lunch how many deaths the drug has caused worldwide. Because they didn't have to report it. They cover it up. They say, oh, it's Canada. It's only 21 deaths. Oh, that's okay, Canada, but you sell this drug in 100 countries. What is it worldwide? They wouldn't tell. Can you believe that? So Vanessa's law, they will tell because they'll be ordered to tell. And that includes injuries as well. And that means if a drug's recalled in another country, they have to tell Health Canada. There's a drug called Avandia right now, which is a diabetes drug, causes heart attacks and strokes. Was taken off the market in 2009 in Europe. It's still on the market in Canada and the US because they have convinced, the doctors had convinced Health Canada they can prescribe it safely, but it causes heart attacks and strokes. So they wouldn't be able to hide things like that anymore. If it's ordered off the market, it's recalled in another market, the drug company will have to immediately tell Health Canada and they can investigate. So, I told you about this, the 5 lays. Vanessa's law will empower the minister to, she can compel new plain language warnings right up front at the top for information on anything to do with safety. This is huge, and it's hard to believe it. Changing the package could make such a deal, but packaging is very, very important. If they change the packaging and warnings on the packagings, it will help avoid adverse drug reactions. And so the minister can order that. She can order them to do new tests or studies. And they already have a market authorization. She can put new conditions on it. She can say, look, this drug's not being prescribed safely. This is extremely powerful. Vanessa would be alive if the minister had the power, if Health Canada were using these powers. So here are the penalties in Vanessa's law. So when I first heard they were actually going to do this, I was shocked. I was meeting with Health Canada officials for 2 years behind the scenes with the approval of the Prime Minister, because I went one day about a little over 2 years ago and I told them about Alison Borges, a little girl who died from taking a birth control pill. She had a blood clot. She was from Oakville. You might have heard on the radio, they found her body in a stairwell at Queen's. She had no warning of blood clots. Nobody should give a young woman, any woman, a birth control pill without warning them about blood clots. People die from blood clots. But she had no warning. She had a pain in her calf for days. It went to her chest. She had pulmonary embolism in her chest. She told her mother, I think I got a cold. I'm staying here for the weekend. And she died. I told that story to the Prime Minister, and between us here, is this being taped? It is being taped. Anyway, he became very, very engaged with the issue, and that's when I started to see action. So I was meeting with the Health Canada officials, and they were talking about fines and stuff. I said, you can't have a fine that makes any sense. We just heard, like, GlaxoSmithKline had a $3 billion fine in July 2012, but they sold $26 billion worth of the drugs that they were fined over. It's just the cost of doing business. I said, you have to have unlimited fines for criminal negligence. Guess what they put in the bill? Unlimited fines. I was shocked. Because I had bashed Health Canada for 12 years. I have witnesses here. Nobody bashed Health Canada more than me. This was absolutely huge, because it's the only thing that's going to get the attention of a drug company that can pay a $3 billion fine is if a judge can say, how much did you sell of that stuff while all these people were dying? And they say $26 billion. You go, okay, that's your fine. Because that's the only way you're going to get the attention. With one additional thing, and I'll show you what that is. So that's for false or misleading statements made knowingly and recklessly, or for knowing and recklessly causing serious risk of injury to human health. So 5 years in prison, that would really get their attention. Imagine the president of the drug company going home to her husband or his wife and saying, yeah, we had a real good year, but I have to go to prison for 4 years or 5 years. That will change everything, because right now it's just the cost of doing business. This is very powerful stuff. And that's for summary conviction. It's 2 years and $1 million fine. But those fines, by the way, there's other fines, $5 million a day for any breach of the act. So, off-label use, early warnings. All serious adverse drug reactions will be reported. Vanessa's Law, we're going to require under federal power healthcare institutions, including all hospitals and labs, et cetera, to report any serious adverse drug reaction. That will catch the most serious ones. We don't have power over doctors. That's all provincial power. We don't have it. But we'll catch most of the serious ones. That can change the entire culture of delivering medicine when they have to report them in a timely fashion. It'll be a fantastic early warning system when they come out with a new drug and all of a sudden there's 3 heart attacks reported in the first 6 months or first 3 months. That would be a fantastic early warning system. So they'll have to report them. And if the drugs are causing adverse reactions, the minister can say, we want you to change the label, we want you to do a new post-market study, and we want you to put conditions on the use of this drug. They might say you can't prescribe it in that dose, contraindicate that, or they might just say take the drug off the market. By the way, when they finally got Propulsed off the market, it took 3 months of negotiation to get it off the market under the current law. The drug companies, they fight it, or they fight the label changes. I have this thick pile of papers between Janssen Ortho and Health Canada where they fought changing the label, even a sentence, a label that almost no one reads, even one sentence. And I have a record from the States where they're changing the label for Propulsed, and one of the vice presidents said, if you change that to change the warning on the label, it's going to cost us $200 million in sales. Because that's their primary interest. Not how many patients' lives are going to be sold. That's going to cost us $200 million in sales. So this will put the minister in charge and Health Canada. Penalty for any breach of the Food and Drug Act is $5 million a day and 2 years in prison. So the entire act, including, by the way, illegal promotion. Now, illegal promotion is very, very broadly defined in the act, I have to tell you. It means any kind. It could mean a brochure, it could mean an ad on TV, it could mean billboards. They could be facing $5 million a day. This is really changing the game. And also, there's the injunction power. And what will happen is Vanessa's Law gives the Health Canada and the minister the power to issue an injunction. And so if they're advertising beyond the bounds of approval, they can tell them to stop, and if they don't stop, they're in contempt of court, if they get approval in the court, and then they could face court fines and court penalties. This is very powerful stuff. Really, it's a very broadly based power. Contraindications. Okay, Vanessa's Law, they're going to have to report post-market adverse reactions. They can't hide them anymore. Transparent clinical trials will provide a base for independent surveillance. So anybody who wants can go and look up all the trials on a drug and look for faults, look for problems, because they can't hide them anymore. Any drugs being used in an unsafe manner will face label changes, new tests, amended authorizations, or just be taken off the market. And Propulsed was also dose sensitive. We talked about that a little. So the minister has the power under Vanessa's Law to direct a reassessment, suspend or contraindicate, change the labels, and this is really powerful too. Remember I told you in other countries they have different sets of rules, and the drug company will only take a drug off the market, usually, when they've been ordered to. So this gives Health Canada and the minister the power to say, we like the safety information that's published in Europe, we want you to publish that for Canadians, just like that. Or we like the American warning better, we want you to use that warning. They won't be able to play that game anymore. And a lot of times the American warnings are superior, I must say. Sometimes Canadian warnings are superior, but not very often. Okay, so she can order new studies or have new conditions placed on the market value. Once again, no post-market surveillance. They could face recall. And here's another one. They'll be working with regulators in other jurisdictions. So they'll be looking at the adverse drug reactions in other jurisdictions and what conditions have been put on the drugs. That's relatively new too. I told you how it was contraindicated for its most common side effect. So compulsory adverse drug reaction reporting for healthcare institutions will reveal risks earlier. Because what they do now is they chat and they go, yeah, I heard a signal on that drug. There was a signal in England on, signal, that's people dying. Signal on that one. Then finally they sit down about a year later and they go, oh my gosh, people have been dying from this drug. And they have never put it together. But because they have to report them, they'll be able to find them much faster and earlier. And also, when doctors get plain language labels up front in bold print, they'll be able to understand them. And guess who else will? We will. Patients will become empowered. Transparent clinical trials will allow independent researchers to investigate and report true risks, because the trials will be transparent as well. So, okay, this is again upfront in plain language, and I'll show you quickly. I'll show you an example of an American black box warning, which is what we're going to have in Canada, which is a far superior warning. This is another one. In the States, for the 200 most risky drugs, they have a black box warning. That is, it's literally in a black box, and it really gets the patient's attention because it's in bold print. And they list the risks right up front, not on page 17 like I told you, or page 44. Right up front, like the first thing that you read. I've been fighting for this for 14 years in Canada. It's finally going to happen. And it should happen. In the UK, they call it a black triangle warning. It's an upside-down black triangle. So that really gets patients' and doctors' attentions. And so they will be handed out. The patient information leaflets we get now, they're written by software companies that sell computers to pharmacies. Do not rely on them. Do not trust them. They don't list the rare but serious side effects, which are the most important ones. You have to do your own homework. But once this bill is fully implemented, patients will get a leaflet that actually lists right up front, here's the risk that you are facing. And then you can talk to your pharmacist, talk to your doctor, and decide if the risk is worth it for you. But you'll be an informed patient. And the minister can order drug reviews, label changes, and special warnings. And I've always insisted, same thing when I was meeting with the Health Canada officials, I said, the Minister of Health should be able to issue any warning at any time. And if doctors are prescribing a dangerous drug, she should be able to put newspaper ads in papers across Canada. Guess what? It's in the bill. It's in the bill. The minister has the power to do that. If she tried it before Vanessa's law passed, the drug companies would sue. And they threaten to sue Health Canada all the time. Okay, so this is the same thing I've been talking about. They're going to get the truth. They're going to have it right in front of them, and doctors and patients could make better decisions. They're going to get awareness earlier from adverse reaction reporting. So there's the same powers again. And I told you about confidential business information. Okay, the minister can release it publicly without notice to the drug companies. You should have heard them at the hearings in the Senate. They were whining. They said, well, you should give us notice and get our permission before you release it. No, this is life-saving information. These means these pills are in people's homes. They could be taking them at any time, and they could have a reaction to them at any time. And the drug companies are asking the Senate, no, keep the rule where they have to give us notice and get our permission. Okay, this is just, oops, sorry, I went too fast. This is the U.S. label for Paxil. This is an example of a good label. You see the first sentence? The first thing they tell you about the drug in 40 pages is suicidality. A lot of people go, gee, is that suicide? But yeah, it is. But at least they're starting to get the gist of it. In antidepressant drugs, increase the risk compared to placebo of suicidal thinking and behavior. That's a pretty good warning. It's not plain language quite. A layperson would have trouble understanding. But it's pretty good, and it gets your attention. You go, really? This could make me think of suicide? So that if you're a patient, 1 out of 100 who takes antidepressants who starts thinking about killing themselves, you go, oh yeah, I saw that in the label. And you call your doctor, you say, I think I might be having that. So, and then down here in red, patients of all ages who are started should be monitored appropriately and observed closely for clinical warning. Okay, does anybody know a doctor who has time to do that? I've never met one. Every antidepressant has that on the label. It's pretty hard to find a doctor who has time. What are they supposed to do? Call you up every couple of days? Or take your call every couple of days or something? Or is they supposed to issue a suicide warning to your roommate or your spouse or your family? Keep your eye on your son, because there's a small chance, maybe 1 out of 100, maybe 1 out of 50, he may become suicidal. I think they should do that with the permission of the patient. They should, because people are committing suicide on antidepressants. So there's a decent warning. And there's the med guide. Now this thing is the one you get handed in the drugstore. Look at the ones in red. It's really, really good. The ones we get in Canada, it talks about headaches and diarrhea. It doesn't give you a decent warning. These ones are really good. What's the most important information I should know about antidepressant medicines, depression and other serious mental illnesses, and suicidal thoughts or action? 1, antidepressant medicines may increase suicidal thoughts or action in some children, teenagers, and young adults within the first few months. That's a half-decent warning, isn't it? And look at down here. Pay close attention to any changes, especially sudden changes in mood, behaviors, thoughts, or feelings. This is very important when an antidepressant medicine is started or when the doses change. Let me show you a Canadian label for the same drug. Nope, sorry, I went too fast. I missed the Canadian label. The Canadian label is vague and doesn't mention anything about suicide until page 6. That's going to change under Vanessa's law. Okay, so this was an announcement I just want to show you. This is a regulation that's already been passed, but we've given the drug companies, the government's given the drug companies a year to react because they have to change all their labels. They're going to have to fit their drug label information into a template so it's easy to understand for patients, et cetera. And it doesn't look like much, does it? If you look at A2, the warning, the information must be expressed in plain language. Then it says the format of the label, including the manner in which all of its text and graphics are displayed, shall not impede comprehension. It doesn't look like much, but that is very powerful. That means the size of the print, what is written, where it's written. This is extremely going to be extremely powerful for patients. And that one's already passed and it's coming into place. It's not part of Vanessa's law. It's a regulation that's already put in place. But it's part of a transparency initiative at the Ministry of Health. Okay, this is another issue that I'll just take a look at some of these drug names. Look how close they are. And they cause accidents and people get hurt and people die because doctors' handwriting is not always legible. So if you look at, for instance, number 2, they're both cancer drugs. If you get the wrong one, it might be the wrong one for you and you die. Or down here, Celebrex, which is a painkiller, versus Cerebex. Not good. Not good to have these drugs. Losec, which is a heartburn drug, versus Lasix, and I forget what Lasix is. Does anybody know? What is it? Diuretic, yeah. Here's one, morphine versus hydromorphone. Mistakes are made in prescriptions, and at least one 69-year-old died. Vanessa's law empowers Health Canada to turn down names that are too close. Why didn't they do this before? How hard was it? Why didn't anybody think of it? Anyway, it's in Vanessa's law. Okay, I'm just going to leave that slide there. I'm done right now. That slide there shows the fines. These are not all. These are just many of the fines the drug companies have paid for illegal activity. I am talking criminal activity. They admitted and they settled out of court. Nobody went to jail. There's the top one that David and I told you about, $3 billion for GlaxoSmithKline. And by the way, GlaxoSmithKline, it's not on the chart. 2 weeks ago, they got fined $1 billion yuan in China, which is $535 million, for bribing doctors. So they haven't learned a thing. They haven't learned a thing. Nothing has changed. And this is why Vanessa's law is so important. It's actually absolutely critical. Thank you very much.